everyone who's just joined. I'm Nilupa. I am an artist based in Birmingham, and I'm one of the 4 commissions that MAIA and Maslaha have commissioned as part of their Finding Space for Joy and Sanctuary during this pandemic that's happening right now. I'm the first one of the 4 commission sessions that are happening. So the other 3 are put on their Instagram, and there's like a really cool post for it. So please go have a look at the other 3 artists that are doing sessions. I've got them marked on my calendar, so you guys have to be there too. Part of my session today, I'm gonna give you a bit of a weaving demonstration. So if anyone has done weaving before, that's great. We get to weave together. But if not, I'm gonna kind of go through how I kind of show people how to start off their own weaves and kind of how I practice it in my own way, but also the way my workshops kind of come about with weaving. But yeah, so make sure you kind of mark all the other 3 commissions that are going to happen on your calendars and make sure you're there. They're not all on the Instagram live, so please do make sure, because I know there's one on Zoom and there's one on the IG workshops, so write that one down. But yeah, so I'm gonna kind of show you a bit of a weaving demonstration, and then we can do a nice Q&A and I can pretend like I know what I'm doing. So for anyone that has kind of looked at my practice previously, I use weaving quite a lot in my photographic practice. I graduated from a BA in photography, so a lot of my arts practice is quite lens-based, so you'll find that I do quite a lot of stuff around photography, but my photography is very materialistic, so I kind of, for me, it's quite important what I can do with the image. And weaving is something that kind of came about for me through a previous project that I was working on, and it became a really integral part of my practice, which I didn't really anticipate it to do. I find that weaving is something that's very versatile. It's something that is very universal, and almost anyone and everyone can weave. Oh my god, I'm seeing people I know. This is exciting. So yeah, and I think for me, weaving has always been something that it's kind of almost just become a part of my practice, but also a place that I found kind of connects me to others, because it's not just doing the weaving that's quite exciting for me, but also kind of teaching it to others and always meeting someone different at a workshop who finds that the practice of weaving connects to them differently. And I think that's why this commission of Joy and Sanctuary was quite important for me, because I find that there is this joy in craft, and there is this joy in learning something new and being able to do something with it. And that's exactly what's helped me, and it's this kind of connection that I get with my participants and with people who I'm educating in different ways with weaving. I've done various weaving workshops with different age ranges, different learning abilities, different mental abilities. I recently did a commission at a primary school where I was equipped with EAL learners, and it's one of those things that it's really versatile, and you find that a lot of people connect to the craft even if we don't have the same spoken language. And I think that's something quite beautiful and quite special about learning a form of craft. So I'm gonna set up my little tripod here. If anyone has got pre-cut up strips, you can weave along with me, but otherwise I will have this video recorded on the MAIA page and you can look over it again. But feel free to message me after if you're curious about anything weaving related that you forgot to ask. But I'm just gonna kind of set up my little weaving section that I have here. If you find at any point I'm just kind of tuning off, it's because I'm trying to make sure that it's getting recorded and I just don't turn anything off. But yeah, so what I've done is already pre-cut quite a lot of my own images. You can try this at home with magazines, you can do it with newspapers, magazines, coloured paper, scrap paper. It's kind of up to you what you weave with. These are my photographs that I've cut up. You might be able to start noticing them with a lot of the other strips, but when I do a lot of workshops, I usually pre-cut images that I've taken for the workshops. Depending on what the workshop is, if it's part of a commission, the images will relate to the commission that I'm working on. Or if it's a workshop where it's a group of people learning a different skill, then I do try and kind of have a range of different images that are a lot more easier and a lot more colourful and vibrant to weave together. So what I've done is I usually pre-cut my strips to about 1 to 2 centimeters wide, and that's what I kind of take to sessions with me. I do mine on the guillotine, so as you can tell, not every strip is of the same size. If you are someone who has OCD in that way, which I do, it just depends on what kind of piece that I'm making. I think this part might annoy you a little if the strips aren't the same. So what I'm going to do is start off with 4 strips. I've got these 4 strips going vertical, and the idea here is that when you are weaving, the vertical strips are known as the warp. Now, the warp is one of the 2 components that are used when weaving, and it's when you're weaving on a weaving loom, the warp and the weft are quite important when you see different instructions. I'd be explaining to you as horizontal and vertical, whereas when you read up instructions, it'll talk about the warp and the weft, and it's important to know which one's which, otherwise you can really muddle up a tutorial or an experiment that you're working on. So I've started off with 4 vertical strips here, and what I'm going to do is start off with another strip, and I'm taking it horizontally. Now, when you're taking a strip horizontally, you're using this as your weft. So the warp and the weft together are what make up your woven piece. And I don't have a loom with me, but I will, hang on. So when you're doing a woven piece with thread, the warp again is what you tie up to your loom, and the weft is what you put in through. So that's exactly what we're going to do with the images. So once I get my weft, what I'm going to do is you follow an alternating pattern. So this is called a plain weave. So it's the plain weave that you would try with thread, and it's also one of the weaves that I like to try to get people into learning how to weave together in the first place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the first strip, under the second strip, over the third, and then under the fourth. Now that is actually your first woven strip. So if I push mine down here, what I'm going to do is get the second one, and you're following the same pattern on, but because I went over the first strip here, what I'm going to do is go under, over, under, over. Now, once you're weaving, you'll realize that you are alternating the pattern and carrying that on. One of the mistakes that I see a lot of people make is that once you get to a certain point, you might just forget that you need to alternate, and you might just carry the pattern on. So if I was to carry the pattern on here and go under the same strip again, you'll see that it's quite loose and it won't sit together. So the whole idea behind weaving and alternating the weave is to make sure that it holds together, because as you can kind of tell with weaving, there's very little gluing and sticking involved. Everything happens with the way you fold the paper together. So if I carried on another one here now, because I've gone under that, I'm going over this over, under, and you just gradually carry on the pattern and you take it as you go. Depending on what I'm making, I usually have pre-cut strips of photographs. Sometimes when I'm weaving a piece together, it's really important for me that you know what the image is that I'm weaving, whereas here it's not so important that you know what the image is. I'm just alternating different prints together. So once you get to a point where you have a even amount on your warp and your weft, turn it around and keep carrying on. So you carry on and you gradually get to a point where you have a piece a little like this made up. And this I made earlier on in the morning, just before starting the strips. I feel like a session of little art attack going on here, but I made this piece beforehand, and it was made with the exact same strips as the ones that I've pre-cut. The only difference here is, so what I did was I tried to keep an even number of the warp and the weft. So I think it's 16 strips that I used here, and the whole idea is that I had all the other strips in, and because I've alternated the strips while putting them in, you can tell that this piece holds on its own without falling apart. Now, something that I do quite a lot is I'll get the back of my pieces taped around the side just so that it holds together a lot better. And a piece like this is something that you generally get made in one of my sessions. And I think it's quite exciting to see like the different kind of pieces that people make and the way you can almost use the piece on further. Something this size can always get used as a placemat at home. It can be framed on the wall. I find that a lot of people really like using magnets and sticking them on the fridge. Now, when it comes to doing different kind of weaves, it's a little similar to how you would do it with thread, where you can learn different kind of techniques. So one of the ones that I've previously done is this piece here. And on this piece here, you'll notice that it's a lot different to this one, where it was a plain weave and you went over, under. Whereas here, this is known as a twirl weave. And as you can tell, the strips are going under 3 and over 1. And the whole idea behind a piece like this is that it creates a different effect as opposed to the original plain weave, which goes under and over. And I think once you get the hang of doing something like the plain weave, you get to kind of experiment with the different size of the strips. So as you can see here, these strips are about 0.5 centimetre, I want to say, whereas these were more 1 centimetre to 2 centimetres wide. And if I turn this one over, it might be easier for you to see the kind of style of weaving. So as you can see here, it's not your simple over under strips, but rather it's kind of going through in a pattern. So once you kind of get the hang of how to weave strips together and how to kind of make it hold, you can kind of play around with that and play around with different strips. And again, you can play around with the size of the strips. So as you can see, this piece here is quite long as opposed to something like this that's a lot smaller. So it's completely up to you what you kind of play around with. One tip I would give is that the thicker the paper, the better it holds. So I find that when I do a lot of my sessions, I get my pieces I get my pieces printed onto this thicker GSM paper. So this is a 300 GSM paper, which I've got one of my photographs printed onto. And I find that when I'm teaching people to weave for the first time, if it's something that's thicker for them to hold, it's easier to manage. And especially with a lot of younger children. So when I do sessions in schools, I find that they prefer the strips to be a lot thicker. So that's something that's kind of quite useful to learn. And again, you might find that something that's a lot wider is helpful for you as opposed to having something that's 1 centimetre. This piece here, so again, this kind of comes back to the idea of how if I'm making a piece where I want you to see what the image looks like, I'll make it more in a little more of an OCD style. And I get very OCD when it comes to kind of weaving something together where I want you to see what the image is of behind. And I kind of almost tape it down and number the pieces, and it's probably why it takes me quite a long time to make some of my bigger pieces. But I also do quite a lot of weaving on a loom, and this is one of the pieces that I can kind of find in front of me right now, where I've woven together different threads in different kind of patterns and dimensions and directions with my loom. So this is a smaller loom that I have. It's about an A3 size loom, I want to say. And on that, you can kind of see it's the exactly same way that you would have woven a paper one, as opposed to where the threads are. So you can see that it's got a warp and it's got a weft and it's going in. I made this off a loom that I bought. I want to say I bought it off Amazon. But if anyone is interested, I can send you the link to that. But otherwise, making a weaving loom at home is actually quite easy. I didn't realise how easy it is. So if you did Google making a weaving loom at home, that is something that you can kind of do and try. But yeah, does anyone have any weaving related questions before you get to see me talk about me a bit more? Who taught you to weave? Oh, so I'm gonna turn this around because this feels weird when I'm talking. But so with me, I actually self-taught myself how to weave. But I was actually working on a project in Coventry, where so I was working on a project in Coventry where the project was based in Foles Hill, which is in Coventry, and Foles Hill is an area, if you research up, which a lot of the ribbon weaving industry thrived in the area of Foles Hill, and that's kind of where the weaving came from. So I was at that time making a project on this area of Foles Hill. Foles Hill was a place that drew me to it because of the fact that it was very multicultural, and it was something that I was very interested in kind of exploring as part of the work that I was doing at the time. And it was through learning about like the diversity and the migration in Foles Hill that I learned that Foles Hill actually had this kind of ribbon weaving industry that thrived there. So what I did was started learning how to weave through looking at tutorials online. I looked at a lot of instructions. I'm someone who prefers looking at like diagram instructions to kind of get the gist of what the weave would look like, and I find that's easier for me. Whereas I found that a lot of times when I'm teaching, a lot of people prefer you to show them how to do it. So again, everyone learns differently, so that just kind of depends on what you prefer. But I did self-teach myself weaving. It's actually a funny story, but when I was doing this project in Foles Hill, it was one of those things where I think that was something that really connected me to the weaving a lot more, to find out that unintentionally it's part of my inheritance in some way, and the fact that, you know, my great grandmother wove and now that I'm weaving, and I think it was something that kind of came to me and became a lot more personal than just kind of performing a craft. So I think that's kind of where the weaving came about and where weaving kind of came together for me. Since that project, I've done quite a lot of things, exploring my own family heritage, exploring arts and crafts. So my family's from Bangladesh, and it was quite important to me to kind of explore my heritage, my culture, and kind of see how weaving or just craft forms and art forms fitted into this kind of idea of how I connect to the space. So I think that's where weaving became quite important for me. And I think it's something, especially now that we've got this time that we're at home and it's almost like you're stuck at home and you want to be able to do something. I think being able to weave and try something out new is quite therapeutic in some way. So for me, weaving kind of started off with this whole aspect of trying out a craft form, but also trying out something new. And it gradually became this part of my own practice where I was really interested in kind of the gender roles that came through with craft, and a lot of my research speaks about gender roles in craft and about how certain craft forms were seen as lower because of the fact that they were associated with women. I feel like that's a whole new story, but I think that was something that really interested me, but it was also something that I found I really wanted to kind of explore further. And it was this idea of, why is it that just because women were known to weave, that suddenly the art craft form of weaving cannot be known as anything more, or the fact that just because I'm a woman I'm supposed to weave. So I think there's a lot of kind of like political underlining issues around weaving. I'm currently looking at a lot of ideas and theories around weaving and just various craft forms as a form of therapy, and how people have used craft forms to deal with different kind of grieving processes in their life. So I think weaving, again, it's that kind of versatile thing that comes about a lot for me. But yeah, that's kind of where weaving came from. But yeah, does anyone have any other questions? Ooh, I'm glad that everyone's really liking the weaving. It's quite fun once you get started. And I think it's something that kind of takes a lot of practice to get to a point where you feel like you're happy with the way the weave looks. I think the largest weaving piece that I've done was 28 foot long, and it was exhibited at the Herbert Art Gallery exactly a year ago now. So it was around May time last year where I exhibited this piece in in the Herbert Art Gallery, and it's also on my website. So if anyone's interested in seeing different kind of weaving work that I've done, a lot of my weaving installations are quite large, and I think it's one of those things that I found that once I get weaving, it gets bigger and bigger. So I think for me it's been quite important to see how the weaving kind of connects to a space and kind of connects to the ideas of what the certain project that I'm working on is about. I do other stuff other than weaving, so it's not always weaving. I do a lot of various forms of photographic based work, so a lot of people don't know, but whenever I am doing weaving projects, they're all based around my own photographs. So any woven piece that you see, it's original photographs that I've taken and then kind of woven them in together with whatever project I'm working on. I find that weaving is something that connects a lot to community-based projects because of this history that weaving has to community building, and the history that weaving has to kind of bringing people together. So if you ever date back and are interested in like the arts and craft movement and looking at various forms of craft, you'll find that you can date back weaving to a space and a place where a lot of people would come together and weave something together. And I think that's kind of something that was always really important to why I use weaving in a lot of my practice. But yeah, hi Josie. But yeah, does anybody have any other questions regarding weaving or just in general about my arts practice? Anything? I'm just reading. Ugh. Oh. 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 What are my aspirations as an artist? So I don't. That's a really big question. I think for me, I think my arts practice is very, very widespread in the sense that I do a lot of anything and everything. Aside from being an artist, I love saying that, I'm an artist. Aside from being an artist, I think one of the other really important parts of my practice is educating, and whether it's educating craft forms or getting people to learn new skills, or it's educating photography. So I do quite a lot of lecturing in photography, and I think it's something that's quite important to me to kind of give back the whole notion of something that I've learned and something that's always been quite special to me. And I think for me that's quite important. That's one of my kind of biggest goals and aspirations as an artist, to be able to always give back something that I've learned, whether it is through learning a skill form or whether it's through just kind of sharing knowledge that you have about different things. But yeah, Josie asked, what are you finding working difficult? I've not been doing much work during lockdown. I think it's, at first I was like, oh, it'll be fine, I'll get a lot of stuff done, and then gradually you kind of get into a routine where it doesn't feel as comfortable working anymore. And I haven't been to my studio, so I have a studio in Grand Union in Birmingham, and I haven't visited my studio in the past month, over a month now. I haven't actually visited my studio since we've officially been in lockdown. And working from home is a lot more crazy and a lot more it's a little more overwhelming than I thought it would be. I think it's just almost kind of pushing yourself to start working and pushing yourself to get things done. I think it hasn't helped that a lot of things have got cancelled, so sometimes I feel like I don't have the motivation to carry on working because I know that exhibitions have been postponed, or commissions have been postponed, or just various workshops that I would have at this point be delivering or planning for have just been postponed. So it's kind of trying to manage time better. I think I do try and kind of plan out what I need to do and when things are, but I think because of this uncertainty of when things will open again, or when things start kind of getting back to normal, how do we get back to that routine? And I think I might struggle quite a lot when we do get back to that point, because I think it's one of those things where I feel like if you need the space to kind of not have to work, don't force yourself to work, because you'll find that you aren't making the best work that you want to make if it's being forced out of you. But I think it's just learning a routine that works for you, but also making sure that you're in a good mental space and you're in a good headspace to be able to work, and especially an environment. So if you're in an environment where it's just not possible to do any work, then don't force the work. So for example, my bedroom at home is very, very small, and I can't get any work done there, and especially a lot of like work that I'm planning cannot get done in my room. But it's different things like working around the house, if that helps, going outside and like, you know, working in the garden. It's just trying to kind of sometimes just change your space and your environment and see if that helps. But I think I have struggled quite a lot working in the lockdown. I think space has been a very big issue for me, but also just kind of getting yourself in the headspace of wanting to work. But yeah, again, I think it's just that kind of uncertainty of when, because a lot of the work that I need to make needs to be made for things that were supposed to happen in summer, or workshops that were supposed to happen through August, and it's just whether or not they're going to happen now. And I think at the back of my head I just kind of tend to think that maybe I shouldn't, no, I don't need to do it right now because I don't know if we're going to have to. So I think that's kind of been where I'm at with lockdown. I think certain points I do get motivational to do different things. So it just depends on like how I'm feeling and whether or not I feel like I can get around to doing something. But yeah. Ooh. Do you sell any other pieces? If so, where can we find them? I do sell the pieces. So a lot of the larger installations, which no one ever buys, they do get bought. But if you're after something smaller, please feel free to message me if there's something specific. So there's specific series that I've done which interest a lot of people, and like people want to buy stuff around that specific series. I have quite a lot of stuff that's been pre-made. Or if not, if you did want something commissioned, a lot of smaller pieces, so something small like this, if you wanted a piece commissioned from your own photographs, or you wanted certain photographs done, I can, you know, we can do different stuff like that. But yeah, because I make them and I've done quite a lot of pieces that are commissioned for private collections, so a lot of people will come to me for things for their house where they have a certain color scheme in their house and they want something made for that. I've made pieces purely aesthetically, so with no kind of contextual reference whatsoever. And if that is something that you're interested in, then, you know, I can make that as well. And I have no objection to making something that's just purely for aesthetic reasons. I feel like that's why weaving something that a lot of people kind of connect to differently, because of the fact that, you know, it can be used for different things. I think for me, originally, when I first started weaving, I got really annoyed when people would tell me that it was really pretty, because I'm like, there was so much kind of history and context behind the work, and I've done all this research, and I used to get really annoyed when people were like, oh, it's really pretty. And then I think I got to a point where and I think it was something that I learned through university, and it was something that my lecturers kind of drilled into me a lot, where, you know, you have that power to choose what people see in your work. And if it is the fact that it's pretty, then that's fine. But I think for me, I got to a point where I realised you're looking at the work because it's pretty, but then you're also learning something from it because you want to know what the work's about. And again, that's kind of something that kind of you pick up along the way with the work. Even now, sometimes I'll make something and I'm like, okay, this looks really nice. There's no purpose for it, but it looks really nice. But yeah, again, so if that is something that, you know, you want commissioned pieces, I'm more than happy to provide that. So please do let me know. I don't have kind of like a website. I have my own website with my work on, but you can't actually buy things off that. But if you do contact me through that, we can kind of have a conversation about if there's anything that you're after. I'm really looking forward to exploring. So when it comes to selecting the photographs that I use, it depends on the commission that I'm working on. So for example, this one here that I showed you just a while ago, this one was made from my arts residency that I did in Aston Hall back in 2018. So in 2018 I was doing an arts residency in Aston Hall, and it was part of the Birmingham Museums Trust and the Arts Council collection residency, and they had an exhibition on at the time. and I was kind of commissioned to do a residency and make something inspired by the hall, but also inspired by the area of Aston, because the whole aspect behind the hall and what Aston is today is quite different, and there is that stark contrast between it. So what I did was I found it quite interesting that in Aston Hall there were all these tapestries, and I went around photographing these tapestries. And I think when I had my first tour in Aston Hall, I was told how a lot of the ladies in the house would sit together for hours and weave these giant tapestries together, and while the men went out to war. So it was quite interesting to kind of see that all the good things in the house were made by women, and men were just non-existent then. But when it came to pieces like that, I found that I really wanted to marry up the idea of what Aston Hall inside was to what Aston as an area is. So you can't tell so much in this image, but it's actually one of the tapestries that has been woven in together with one of the images of a shop on the street in Aston that's just outside the hall. And I think that was quite important because it kind of married in those two ideas of what the hall is, but also what the history behind Aston is. I've done pieces around different areas and different community groups. When I did a project around West Bromwich Market, a lot of the images there that I was weaving together, it was the idea of like marrying in the different stalls. So I think it depends a lot on what the commission is about, and it depends quite a lot on whether or not the again, if it's important that you see the image, as opposed to whether or not it's important that it just has to look a certain way. I've also done quite a lot of weaving with my own self-portraits. That's always a very funny experience because you don't know what to expect, and it's your own face that you're weaving together. I also really enjoy weaving a lot of my own archive images together. So I've done a whole kind of series that you can see on my website where I've both hand woven and digitally woven archive images together. And I think it's one of those things where I don't force the weaving onto the project. I've done projects where weaving has no relevance, and that if you see that project and that's the first project of mine you see, you would never consider me to do weaving at all. So I think it just depends a lot on what the project's about and whether or not the kind of project has some kind of relevance to weaving as opposed to the images as well. I've done quite a lot of pieces where I facilitate the weaving, but I don't necessarily do a lot of the weaving, which is really interesting because I've done quite a lot of community workshops around the idea of getting community groups to do the weaving, and I'm almost just kind of binding it together. I'm like that link that puts it together, whereas the entire piece has not been made by me. So there's quite a lot of kind of that theme as well, where you're using kind of different people to come together and make different things. So I think that's quite important as well with whatever the work is and what the work kind of comes together to you. But yeah. There are quite a lot of artists who explore photography and weaving together. You'll find that various artists do it for different things, and it's quite important to kind of try out and see what works for you. I found that some people don't like weaving photographs at all and prefer weaving weaving coloured paper so you can see the kind of patterns between the paper, whereas you'll get other people who... I've been to a lot of workshops where I have people who just hate the fact that I've got images spliced together that have no relevance to each other. So I'll always get someone who turns around and says, but can you give me all the images so I can put it together? So that's always really interesting for me because it kind of teaches you how different people process images differently and how people process colour, and like the fact that some of the woven pieces you make can be quite busy, and that's not something that a lot of people enjoy, and it's you kind of working around those ideas behind how to kind of connect to someone and connect to their way of working and their way of thinking. But yeah, that's kind of a lot of the ideas behind why the weaving kind of comes together. Ooh. Ooh. Who inspires your practice? I think a lot of my kind of photographic practice is inspired by my own cultural heritage and my own kind of personal life, and I think it's always been important to me the fact that I'm British and I live here and I've been born here, but also I have Bangladeshi culture and heritage in me and my family's from there, and I think it's something that's always been a part of my practice, and it's always something that's kind of come up in the work that I'm making. When it comes to weaving, I think it always depends on what the work I'm making is about. So if I'm making something that is quite based around my own cultural heritage, or around like Bangladesh, or around South Asia, or just around women, it always connects back to this idea that I had a great grandmother who used to weave, who I've never known of, or never heard of, never met, and the fact that, you know, so many years on, I connect to her in that way. And I think that's something that's quite important. And I think I found that it's also been something that's helped me connect to my own cultural heritage and my own kind of traditions. I feel like I've learnt more about my culture through my arts practice, as opposed to learning about it at home or learning about it through what my mom or my dad tell me. And I think that's something that's quite important, because you kind of go yourself and you try and learn that yourself, and it's not that you don't have a pressure to learn it, you want to learn it. And I think that's quite important. And I think for me, what I found was that when I was making a lot of work, I was trying to kind of make work about things that related to me, but also I found that other people could connect with. Especially a lot of the work that I make around being a woman, work that I make around being of these many different cultural identities, like what it means to be a British Bangladeshi Muslim woman living in England, like how does my art work, and how does kind of the themes that I'm making, and how all of that connects together. And I think it's kind of something that I feel intentionally I'm always trying to educate in some way through the work. So I think that's been a big part of my practice, and just in general a big part of what inspires me to keep making. And I really, really do love and enjoy what I do, and I think that's probably one of the main reasons why I keep at it and I keep working. And I think it's really important to be able to have that connection to your own practice, or just in general have that connection to something that's really important to you. Because the minute you kind of feel like it's become a chore, or the minute you feel like, you know, you don't want to do this anymore, you realise that you just don't connect to the work, and you don't make your best work when you're in that kind of moment. So I feel like in that sense, I kind of would advise a lot of people, if art form is something that you kind of want to pursue, don't do it because you're forced to do it, or don't do it because you feel like, oh, I think I'm half good at it and I can do it. You have to feel something towards the work that you're making. And if you don't feel that, then I feel like take that time out, look at whether or not arts practice is something that you're interested in, whether or not it's something that you just kind of want to explore further. Because sometimes you'll find, like, I lecture photography, and I find a lot of students who will start off doing a lot of photographic work and then realise later on that they've learnt a lot of skill through photography, but it's not necessarily something they want to pursue later on in life, and that's completely fine. But I think it's one of those things you kind of have to, you have to try in order to know whether or not if it's been something that's been important for you. Thank you, Soft Clouds. I love seeing Instagram news because I know who people are, but thank you. I'm really glad that, you know, it helps other people, because I think it's important for me to be able to make work knowing that, you know what, someone somewhere is getting inspired by that work, but also to know that someone is finding that work beneficial in different ways. And even if it's through learning a craft form, or even if it's through understanding that, you know what, there is someone that looks like me out there doing something. And I think that was always really important for me, that I found I wanted to be someone that, you know, someone else can see, you know what, she looks like me, and, you know, she's doing, like, you know, she understands those kind of aspects of my life that are kind of portrayed through different forms of art. And I think that was always really important, because I till this day, whenever I see an artist of colour anywhere, literally whether it's on Twitter or I see it on an article somewhere, I get so excited, because I'm like, oh my god, I understand what this work is about. And I think that's really important, and to be able to kind of have someone say that I give that to them is really important for me. And it's something that makes all this really rewarding. Even those days where, you know, there's no commission in sight, or there's no progression for the art career in sight, but it's just that kind of aspect of being able to connect to people, and that, you know, even if you take nothing from the work, you take that one thing that it connects you in some way, is important for me. And I'm glad that I could do that through the work. But yeah, ooh, I'm really not good at this live thing. So anybody else have any other questions, anything weaving related? I'm really excited for everyone to try these. If you guys do try out your own weaving pieces, please tag me into them, please tag the MAIA account into them, and I would love to see what you guys do. And feel free to message me if you have any questions, and again, honestly, anything weaving related or anything kind of art photography related. If anyone else out there just needs to kind of like bounce ideas off, please feel free. Obviously with lockdown, everyone has a lot of spare time, and I'd be happy to help however I can. If there are anyone out there who's thinking of pursuing art degrees or thinking about going to art school, please feel free to message me. But yeah, I'm really glad that quite a lot of you got to join. If you do have any other questions that you just remember after this session, please feel free to message me. But otherwise, thank you so much for so many of you guys joining, and I'm just really glad that you got to all learn how to weave with me. But yeah, so thank you for coming, and it was lovely to kind of speak to you all and show you about my own practice.